Well, now that some time has passed, let's see how people responded to my little devlog experiment. Oh. Huh. Well, for nobody on the internet like me, that is most certainly doing numbers. Okay, what about Steam wishlist counts? That's my favorite number after all, and it'd be nice to see more wishlists as a result of these. Oh. Triple the week before. I guess we're gonna keep making these then. In all seriousness, I'm really happy that people enjoyed the first devlog video I made, and want to thank everyone for the positive response. When I uploaded the video, I wasn't expecting anything more than maybe 100 views and a few likes at the most. Suffice to say, it far exceeded my expectations, and I hope I can continue making videos that you enjoy. I guess we're about to find out. This is only my second devlog after all. For all we know, the first one was a fluke. So, to briefly recap the first devlog, I am making a psychological horror game titled What Hides in Dreams, where death leaves scars. Put simply, it's a horror adventure where I aim to explore the consequences of death and player failure by having the game's story change depending on whether you escaped, killed a monster, or died. The game is being made in Unreal Engine 5, and I'm making use of a starter project called Horror Engine to help development. Now, it should be noted that the previous video was recorded about 2 months before I actually uploaded it because of holidays, usual day-to-day, and nerves. So even though it's only been a month or so since that video's upload, in actuality, there's been a few months of progress between when I recorded much of that video and the moment that I'm recording this one now. 2 more levels have entered basically playable states, them being this spooky office and dimly lit library. The key word there is playable, because yes, you can play through these levels to the end and not run into game-breaking bugs, I think, but they are most definitely in need of polish. The library is the latest level to be playable, and it shows, because some parts truly have the bare minimum assets placed in them, with one room in particular filled with a bunch of basic geometry that's just acting as placeholders for now. I know I said last time that I can do whatever I want with this game's environments because it all takes place in a dream, but a dream world can absolutely be a bit more than this. But I'll get there when I get there. The other major task has been updating the game's graphical user interface, or GUI for short. I've been using the default Horror Engine GUI for a while, and though a few modifications had already been made, I felt it was time to really try and distinguish my game from the Horror Engine defaults. I made a few custom graphics, and then looked into fonts, then swapped out the defaults with my own. The biggest changes are this little item collect animation I made when picking up items, and changes to the inventory UI, including a faint moving background that admittedly may not be very visible on YouTube. I made the background by taking a generated Voronoi texture, blurring it, and then creating a new material that rotates it and changes its color. In doing so, I discovered 2 things. First, I accidentally made Earthbound's battle screens, which was completely changing the tone of my game. Observe. Second, after deciding that I would not pivot into an Earthbound-inspired RPG, I found that I could make this neat little flash effect that I've decided will play when the player has taken damage from a monster. Again, it may not show up on YouTube very well, but the idea is that when the player takes damage, the inventory background will periodically flash red to reflect the damage the player has taken. This wasn't going to be a thing, but I really wanted something extra to set my game apart from others using Horror Engine, and I'm quite happy to have stumbled upon this idea. That said, there's almost certainly more that can be done with this, so feel free to give your own input on the inventory graphics. So there you go, 2 new levels and a smattering of GUI changes. Admittedly, when listed out like that, it doesn't sound like a lot for over 3 months of development. Granted, I didn't exactly go into great detail about building levels, although I did recently talk about this in my written blog on my website. An individual level does tend to take me about a month to create, give or take. Still, one might understandably think that over 3 months of development should yield a little more content in the game. Which brings me to the title of this video, which I trust that you noticed and have maybe wondered when I was going to bring up. You might have inferred this from my previous video, but What Hides in Dreams is being solo developed by me. Oh yes, I'm one of those freaks who thinks they can do it all. And to be fair, I have. Thrice. It's not exactly proven to be financially successful, but
it's not always about the money, Spider-Man.
That said, it would be nice to do this full time, so maybe one day enough people will declare my game worthy and buy enough copies to make this full-time game dev thing viable. A man can dream. Working by myself carries both strengths and weaknesses. The primary strength of being a solo developer is that I can do what I want, no one can tell me no, and I hold all the power. But if there's great strengths, there are indeed great weaknesses, namely that I can do what I want, no one can tell me no, and I hold all the power. Seriously, it's nice to be able to do my own thing, but it can be hard to know if it's actually a good idea or not. You can get people to try out your game and give their opinions, but that's about all you have to work with for outside opinion. And usually even doing that involves putting in the time and effort to make your crazy idea a reality, at the risk of finding out that it's terrible and you should consider scrapping it. Here's some other pros and cons, beginning with the pros. For one, you don't need to wait on anyone for much of anything, and so long as design documents make sense to you, then you don't need to clarify things further for other people. In other words, your map design docs can look like this, and you can get away with it. There's also no need to complicate your workflow to accommodate other team members, and no worry about understanding something someone else did for the most part. As for cons, well, there's of course being limited by your own shortcomings, be it art or programming. Art, in my case. You also have to do everything by yourself, including the unfun stuff like marketing. And if something does break, it is 100% on you. So, yeah, set up your version control. You'll thank yourself later when you do something stupid. Now, let's get into one of the reasons why 3 months of development for me only yields a couple of levels and some GUI changes, starting with my typical schedule. I have a toddler who, wouldn't you know, really likes food, which means in order to satisfy her appetite and still do game development, I gotta go work a job like an adult. So my day-to-day looks like this at the moment. First, I go to work and put in my 8 hours. I am a software engineer during the day, which means my coding brain never really turns off. I also have a long commute. It takes a half hour to just get to work from my home, so in total, I spend an hour of my day driving. And you should know, I do not particularly like driving. But once I get home, I get food in my system, and then it's game dev time, right? Wrong! My toddler really likes to play, and incidentally, I happen to really like to play too. Couple that with my dear wife really needing a break from the little munchkin, and next thing you know, I'm spending time each day after work taking care of the little one. Now, don't misunderstand me, I genuinely love this time with my kid. She's adorable, just a barrel of laughs. I love my little gremlin. But it should go without saying that raising a kid does take time. The missus and I do have an arrangement where she usually puts kiddo to bed come bedtime, so once kiddo is passed back to her, I am getting into my game dev shenanigans for the evening. This usually gives me anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to work on the game, depending on how late I want to stay up. Okay, so time is limited then. But us solo developers have our ways of making it work, and it's called using the resources available to you. If you'll allow me to bring your attention back to the video's title again, you'll notice that the full title throws in a sort of in there. And that's because it could be argued that even solo developers are never truly alone. In order to maintain a decent pace, I do rely on some pre-made assets and systems. I've basically said as much when discussing my use of Horror Engine. But it's not just Horror Engine. 3D models from Base Mesh, sound samples from Freesound, and assets from the Fab Marketplace have all found their way into my game. Let's not forget the programs I use too, such as MakeHuman for creating humanoid characters, or the various Blender plugins for helping with modeling and animation. Now, obviously somebody has to make those things, so is it really solo development at that point? Well, if we're gonna split hairs, then I'd still say it counts as solo development. I think of it like this. Who are the active members involved in a game's development? As in, who is responsible every day for making the game a reality at virtually all points in development? If you can only name one person who fits that description, then it's probably been solo developed. Now, obviously, even that is a generalization. If a game starts as a one-person team only to become a 10-person team in the latter half of development, well, then you wouldn't call that a solo developer anymore. Context matters, and what is and isn't considered solo developed is ultimately up to the dev team and maybe even the audience to decide. In my case, while I have gotten help thanks to assets from marketplace sellers, Base Mesh, Freesound, Horror Engine, and indeed Unreal Engine, I wouldn't personally describe any of those contributors as active members of What Hides in Dreams development. Tim Sweeney isn't doing regular Zoom meetings with me to discuss what direction to take this game in, you know? The solo development subreddit has what I think is a good set of guidelines for what constitutes solo game development, but feel free to give your own thoughts on this. I have a feeling that, much like what is and isn't considered indie, there's probably a lot of discussion to be had over what is and isn't solo development. Well, that should do for this one. As of this writing, I am doing a lot of polishing of existing levels. I currently have just under half the game's levels made, so it felt time to, actually, you know what? I'll save that for later. Wink. I suspect I will be resuming level creation soon, but it's been nice breaking from that and simply improving on what's already there. As I am still pretty new to this devlog thing, do leave your feedback on this video through the time-tested use of likes and comments. Still figuring out my style a bit, and with a little guidance, perhaps I'll perfect this eventually. Obviously, subscribing is also nice, but you probably already knew that. Oh, and of course, you can wishlist What Hides in Dreams on Steam as well. I don't know when the game will release, but if you've wishlisted, then you'll get a notification when the game does release. Frankly, if you only do one of these things, then please wishlist the game. That's the big one. We indie developers love that. That'll do for me. Thanks for watching, have a good day, be excellent to each other, and until next time.